I never thought my world would shatter in the way it did. It all started with something small, something almost laughable. My wife, the woman I had spent the last 10 years of my life with, started coming home late more often. At first, I told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe she had work to finish, maybe she was out with her friends. But then, there was the phone. Always glued to her hand, always hiding the screen when I walked by. And when I asked about it, she'd get defensive, too quickly defensive. One night, as she was getting ready for bed, I caught a glimpse of her phone. It buzzed once, then twice. Then a third time. I didn't think much of it at first, until I saw the name flashing across the screen. Dan. I didn't know who Dan was, but I knew she didn't mention him. Not once. We'd been married for years, had built a life together, and suddenly there was someone I didn't know in the picture. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think the worst of her. But the longer I ignored it, the more questions started to pile up. The late nights, the sudden disappearances, the secretive texts. It all felt like a slow burn, like my life was crumbling, but I couldn't pinpoint the moment it began. And then came that phone call, the one that would change everything. I need to tell you something. Her voice trembled through the phone. She wasn't home yet, but I could hear the anxiety in her tone. I didn't know what to expect, but what she said next shattered everything I thought I knew about us. She wasn't the person I married anymore. Or maybe she never had been. I'm seeing someone else, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. That's when the world seemed to stop. I didn't know how to process it. The woman I trusted, the woman I gave my heart to, had betrayed me. But the story didn't end there. No, this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Because what she didn't know was that I had a secret of my own. I wasn't just the man who found out his wife was cheating. I was the man who planned to make her regret it. And the twist? She had no idea that I knew. The game was on, and I was about to turn it all upside down. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. If I did, she'd just deny it. She'd turn it around and make me seem paranoid. So I waited. I had to stay calm. But inside, a storm was brewing. She came home that evening like everything was normal, flashing her usual smile. Hey, she greeted, dropping her keys in the dish by the door. How was your day? I forced a smile, masking the whirlwind inside me. Good. Yours? It was long, she replied quickly, pulling off her shoes and heading for the kitchen. Her words were hollow. She was lying. I could feel it. I needed to play it cool. If I showed her I knew, she'd just cover it up. So, I leaned against the counter and asked, how's everything with your coworkers? Her pause was barely noticeable, but I caught it. She recovered too fast. Fine. Everything's fine. I knew better. It wasn't fine. But instead of confronting her, I dropped a question like it was no big deal. Is Dan a coworker of yours? Her eyes widened just a fraction. It was so small, but I saw it. She recovered quickly, but I knew. Dan? Oh yeah, just someone from the office. I kept my gaze steady, forcing down the anger. Huh, he texts you a lot. Her face faltered, just for a moment. But then she gave that practice smile. It's nothing. But I knew. I knew it wasn't nothing. The next few days I watched. She was more careful now, phone glued to her hand, looking over her shoulder every time it buzzed. The late nights, the distance, everything was adding up. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed it. The message read, I miss you. I can't wait to see you this weekend. Proof. I had it. But I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I needed more than just a text. I needed leverage. Instead of reacting, I sent a message to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, someone I knew could help. It was time to set the trap. She came out of the shower, and I just smiled at her. It wasn't a smile of affection, but of someone who had just started playing the game, and I was winning. Over the next few days, I played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. I didn't confront her. I didn't get angry. I just acted like everything was normal. And the more I acted like I didn't know, the more her guard dropped. She was home late again the next night, but this time she came in, all smiles, asking me about my day like we hadn't just crossed a line in our marriage. She was trying so hard to make things seem normal, like nothing had changed. But I could see it. The way she didn't make eye contact when she spoke, how she'd nervously shift her weight from one foot to the other when she thought I wasn't looking. It was as if she was waiting for me to say something. But I didn't. I said nothing. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing that I was onto her. I played my cards close to my chest. She'd give me these fleeting glances, hoping I would finally ask about her day or about Dan, but I held back. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more uncomfortable she seemed to get. She'd do things like leave her phone out in plain sight, but only when I wasn't looking. She'd go for a walk or check her email, always in places where I wouldn't have a chance to catch her slipping. But I knew every little thing. By now, she was taking calls in private, whispering when she thought I wasn't around. She thought I didn't hear her, thought I didn't hear the little, "I love you," she whispered into the phone one night, just after she thought I'd fallen asleep. I wasn't asleep. I was wide awake, and her words pierced through the silence like a knife. I knew exactly who she was talking to, but again, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I let her believe that I was just letting it go, that I didn't care. I wanted her to think I had no idea, to think I was clueless and passive. And while she was busy hiding her affair, I was planning. The days went by, and her behavior grew more erratic. She'd make excuses to leave the house, stay late at work, or even go to the grocery store at odd hours. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was covering her tracks, and it made me sick. But that was the thing. She didn't realize that every time she tried to cover her lies, she was giving me more of a reason to expose her. The more she tried to hide, the more I uncovered. Then, it came to me. I had to make sure she never saw it coming. I had to make her believe I was the one slipping up, the one losing control. She had to think I was just as lost in this marriage as she was, so she wouldn't see the bomb I was about to drop. The trap was set. I wasn't going to break yet. I wasn't going to let her have that victory. Instead, I would wait. I would let her think she was still in control, that she was winning. And when she was at her most comfortable, that's when I'd strike. It was getting harder to keep up the act. She was slipping, her guilt showing in the way she avoided my gaze or hurried her steps around the house. But I stayed silent. I was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came one evening, when she returned home later than usual. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. I had spent the last few days gathering everything I needed, piecing together her lies. I was ready to make my move. She stepped inside, and as usual, tried to act casual. Her eyes flickered nervously when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table. I put down the paper, watching her closely. "Long day?" I asked, my voice deliberately light. "Yeah," she replied, her tone too quick. "Just work stuff?" I nodded, but kept watching her. "You've been pretty distracted lately." She paused, then forced a smile. "Just tired, that's all." I leaned back in my chair, pretending to think for a moment. "You've been spending a lot of time with Dan, huh?" She froze. The hesitation was brief, but I caught it. Her eyes shifted away from mine. "Dan? He's just a coworker. Nothing to worry about," she said, a little too quickly. I pushed further. "You sure? You two seem pretty close." Her face tightened, and she looked away, almost nervously. "We're just friends." I could tell she was lying, but I played it cool. "Right? Just curious." She nodded awkwardly and walked past me toward the bedroom. I didn't press further. I didn't need to. The look in her eyes had said everything. I sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle. She thought she had it all figured out. She thought she was hiding it. But I was patient. I didn't need to rush. That night, I made a call. I wasn't sure where this was all going, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her win. She thought she was the one pulling the strings, but I was already a few steps ahead. The days stretched on, each one bringing us closer to the inevitable. She had no idea that the game had already shifted in my favor. Every time she grew more defensive, more evasive, I knew her guilt was eating away at her. She thought she was still in control. She was wrong. One evening, she came home late again, and I was ready. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read, but my mind was focused on what was to come. She didn't say much, just dropped her bag and moved toward the kitchen. I watched, my mind ticking through the plan I'd set in motion. I broke the silence first, my voice calm. "I've been thinking about something," I said, watching her pause. "About Dan, your coworker." She froze, her body tense. It wasn't a question anymore. I was already testing her. Her eyes darted away, and she quickly composed herself. "Dan? It's nothing. Just a colleague." I leaned back in my chair, pretending to absorb her answer. "Right. But you've been spending a lot of time with him lately. Late nights. Texting." She went still. "What's your point?" Her voice faltered, but she quickly recovered. I knew I'd hit a nerve. "I just thought it was odd. You've been distant." "I'm not angry, just noticing." I let the words hang in the air, watching her squirm under the weight of them. She took a deep breath. I've been busy at work. That's all. Yeah, I get it. I replied, keeping it casual. I signed up for some new things, too. Maybe we both need a little space. Her eyes widened slightly. Space? She repeated, clearly surprised. I smiled faintly. I mean, we've been drifting. Maybe some time apart would help us figure things out. She didn't know how to respond. She wanted to protest, but she couldn't. She could feel the walls closing in. I wasn't playing the same game anymore. I was in control now. I'll be out for a bit tomorrow, I added, watching her struggle to hold her composure. We can talk later. I left the room without waiting for her response. The silence that followed was thick with tension. She had no idea what was coming. I could feel her guilt pressing down on her, and I knew it wouldn't be long before the lies she'd been telling me would crumble. The following days felt like a pressure cooker, the tension building with every passing moment. I could see it in the way she acted around me. Her forced smiles, her nervous laughter, the way she'd glance at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Every small sign was a piece of the puzzle, and I was watching it all fall into place. She started being extra careful, trying to cover up the obvious signs of her affair. But the more she tried to hide it, the more obvious it became. It was like she was in a panic, constantly looking over her shoulder, but not realizing that I was already ahead of her. One night, I came home a little earlier than usual. She was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood in the doorway, watching her. She must have sensed my presence because her head snapped up, her eyes wide. For a moment, there was a flicker of guilt, but it was gone almost as soon as it appeared. She quickly put the phone face down and gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hey, she said, her voice too cheerful. How was your day? Fine, I replied, stepping into the room. What are you up to? Oh, just checking a few things, she said, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. I didn't press her right away. Instead, I leaned casually against the wall, my gaze never leaving her. You seem distracted lately. Everything okay? She laughed lightly, but it didn't sound genuine. Yeah, just a lot on my mind. I could feel the lie in her words. The tension was thick, but I stayed calm. You sure? I mean, you've been spending a lot of time with Dan. She froze, the smile slipping from her face. Her hand clenched around the edge of her phone, and she shifted in her seat. Dan? He's just a coworker. Really, that's all. Right? I said, my voice measured. But you're texting him a lot, staying out late with him. You sure that's all it is? She didn't answer right away, and that was all the answer I needed. The silence between us felt heavy. She wanted to explain, to cover up her lies, but she couldn't. It was starting to sink in, I knew. She could no longer hide it. She shifted in her seat, trying to regain control. Look, I told you. It's nothing. I didn't push her any further. There was no need. The guilt was written all over her face. She was breaking. The walls she'd so carefully built around her lies were beginning to crack. I stood up, walking toward the door. We'll talk later, I said calmly, already knowing the conversation was over. She didn't try to stop me. As I left the room, I felt a sense of satisfaction. She had no idea how much I knew, how far I had already planned this. She thought she was getting away with it, but the truth was slipping through her fingers. It had been a few days since our last conversation, and the tension was thicker than ever. She was trying to act like everything was fine, but I could feel her unease radiating off her. The more she tried to act normal, the more obvious her guilt became. But still, I kept my distance. I was patient, waiting for her to slip up, waiting for the moment when I could expose the truth. That moment came one Friday night. I had planned to stay home, but I noticed something strange. She was getting ready to go out. The same late-night work meeting, excuse again. This time, however, something felt different. She was dressed up, way more than usual. It wasn't just an office look. It was something else. Something too casual for work and too intentional for anything else. I pretended not to notice, casually scrolling through my phone while she grabbed her bag and keys. But I wasn't distracted. My mind was racing. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Where are you off to? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She hesitated just a second too long before replying. Just a quick dinner with some colleagues. We're celebrating something. Nothing big. I nodded, not showing any signs of suspicion. Okay, have fun. She didn't look at me when she left, but I could tell from the way she quickly grabbed her jacket and left that she was trying to avoid making eye contact. It was like she knew. She knew I could see right through her. As soon as she left, I didn't waste any time. I had a plan, and this was the moment to execute it. I grabbed her phone from the spot where she'd left it charging. She was always so careless with it now, like she forgot that I knew exactly how to get into it. I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding not out of anger but anticipation. I had already seen the breadcrumbs, but this was the final piece. The messages between her and Dan were everything I needed to confirm the affair. The texts were intimate, full of flirtations and promises. She had been hiding it right under my nose, thinking I wouldn't catch on. And there it was. One message stood out. Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you so much. I'm already planning our next weekend getaway. That was it. I could feel my pulse quicken as the weight of the betrayal settled in. But instead of anger, a cold calm washed over me. I wasn't going to lose control. I wasn't going to let her think for a second that she had won. I put the phone back where it was and sat down on the couch, trying to appear calm, collected. But inside, I was already planning my next move. She didn't know it yet, but her world was about to come crashing down. It had been an hour since she left for dinner. I wasn't angry yet. I was calm, calculated, and I could feel the moment approaching. The moment when everything would come crashing down. When she walked in, I didn't say anything right away. I stayed still, letting the silence stretch between us. She looked at me, a little too brightly. Hey, back early, she said, her voice a bit too high. I didn't answer immediately. I just let my eyes settle on her, watching her fidget with her keys. Her smile faltered. Something on your mind? She asked, trying to sound casual. Yeah, I replied, my voice flat. I've been thinking about us. About everything. She stiffened, clearly uncomfortable. What do you mean? I stood up slowly, stepping toward her. You've been distant lately. Too distant. She laughed, but it was strained. I've just been busy. Work stuff. I nodded, still watching her closely. Yeah, work. But I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with Dan. Her breath caught for just a moment. Dan? He's just a coworker, that's all. You sure? I asked, my voice even. Because it seems like a lot more than that. The late nights. The texts. You've been slipping away. Her eyes shifted, and she fumbled with her purse. I don't know what you're talking about. It's not what you think. I think it's exactly what I think, I said, stepping closer. You've been lying to me. Sneaking around. You think I don't know, but I see it all. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I could see her shaking. You've been seeing him, haven't you? I know about the affair. Her face went pale. She took a step back, her eyes wide. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just a mistake. I let out a bitter laugh. A mistake? You think I'm stupid enough to believe that? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she started to tremble. I didn't want to hurt you. I love you, but I love him too. I stepped back, letting her words sink in. I couldn't feel anger anymore, just a cold detachment. You thought you could have it both ways. You thought you could juggle me and him, without consequences. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I never meant for it to get this far. But I had already heard enough. You're a coward. You couldn't even tell me the truth when it mattered. I turned to leave the room, her desperate calls echoing behind me, but I didn't look back. I knew everything I needed to. The house felt empty. The silence was deafening, and as I stood there, the weight of the conversation still pressed on me. She had no idea what was coming next. She thought her confession would make everything better, that maybe I would forgive her or at least try to salvage something. But I wasn't the same man anymore. The man she married was gone, replaced by someone who had been wronged, someone who was done being manipulated. I didn't speak to her that night. I didn't need to. She tried to reach out, to beg me to listen, but I just ignored her. The way she had looked at me, so broken, was almost pitiful, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. The next few days were a blur. I stayed out as much as I could, giving her space to stew in the mess she created. She would send me texts, apologizing, pleading for us to talk, to fix things. But I didn't respond. Not a word. I wanted her to feel the isolation, the complete disconnect that I was now experiencing. She had made her bed, and now she would lie in it. One evening, after several days of silence, she finally cornered me when I got home. Her face was a mess, red eyes, disheveled hair. She had been crying, and it was obvious she was losing her grip on everything. Please, can we just talk? Her voice cracked. I love you. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I stared at her, feeling nothing. You love me. I asked, my voice flat. You don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have cheated. Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. There was no excuse left. There was nothing she could say to fix it. I know I messed up, she whispered. But I swear, it wasn't about you. It was just something I got caught up in. I shook my head. That's the problem. You got caught up in something. And now, you want me to pick up the pieces? I'm not doing that. I'm done. She looked at me, eyes full of desperation. Please, don't leave me. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance. But I was already walking away, moving toward the door. It's too late. You had your chance. You chose him over me. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences. I left without another word, leaving her standing there, her broken sobs echoing through the empty house. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I had already moved on in my mind. What was left to say? There was no fixing this. There was no turning back. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of peace. The storm inside me had calmed, and now I was free. I couldn't sleep that night. I drove aimlessly for hours, clearing my head. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too loud, too consuming. I was calm, detached, as if I were watching my life from a distance, a spectator in my own story. I had made my decision, and it felt final. She had crossed a line that there was no coming back from, and now I had to live with the fallout. The next day, I went back to the house to collect some of my things. I knew it was over, but something about going through the motions, packing up the parts of my life that no longer fit, made it real. She wasn't home when I arrived, probably giving me space to think, like she always said she wanted. But there was nothing to think about anymore. I knew the truth. I knew what she had done, and I knew I couldn't go back. I moved quickly, packing a suitcase with clothes, personal items, and a few things I couldn't leave behind. As I was going through the drawers, I found a small trinket she'd given me years ago, a reminder of how things used to be. I stared at it for a moment, my fingers tracing the edges of the gift. For a second, it felt like all the years we'd spent together were compressed into that small object. But then, just as quickly, I shoved it into the bag and slammed the drawer shut. It wasn't worth remembering. She wasn't worth remembering. When she finally came home that evening, I was already halfway out the door. She found me in the living room, pacing, my eyes fixed on the door. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching me like she wasn't sure how to approach the situation anymore. She knew, deep down, that she had lost. I don't want to do this, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I don't want to lose you. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing. There were no waves of sadness or anger, no lingering hope that things might work out. There was only a cold realization that we were done. You already have, I said softly, my tone matter of fact. Her face crumpled. Please, don't go. We can fix this. I can make it right. I shook my head, not even giving her a chance to continue. You had your chance. You chose him. And now, you're left with nothing. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. I didn't comfort her. She didn't deserve comfort. Not after what she had done. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm, stopping me for a moment. Please, she whispered again, voice breaking. Don't leave me like this. I looked at her hand on my arm, then back at her tear-streaked face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But the moment passed quickly. I pulled my arm away and took a deep breath. This is it, I said quietly. Goodbye. And then, without another word, I walked out of the door. The finality of it all settled over me like a weight. I wasn't coming back. I had made sure of it. I didn't feel relief immediately. It wasn't some instant rush of freedom. There was no grand sense of victory, only an overwhelming emptiness. I had walked away from the life I knew, from a person I had once loved. But the weight of what had happened lingered, heavy and unresolved. I was free, yes, but I was also broken in a way I hadn't expected. For the next few days, I stayed with a friend. I needed to get away from the house, from the memories, from her. Every room seemed to echo with the past, with the life I thought I had. I tried to keep myself busy, staying out late, catching up with old friends, anything to drown out the thoughts. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape what she had done. The betrayal still clung to me, sticky and suffocating. I hadn't realized how much I had trusted her, how much I had invested in her, in us. The trust that had once been a steady foundation now felt like shattered glass beneath my feet. She called me a few times. I didn't pick up. I didn't want to hear it. Her apologies, her pleas, it wouldn't change anything. She made her choice, and now she had to live with it. I spent the following week in a haze, alternating between numbness and bursts of anger. Every time I thought about her, about the lies, my mind went back to the images I had seen, the messages, the secretive behavior, the way she'd kept it all hidden right in front of me. It didn't matter how much she claimed she loved me or how sorry she was. The truth was she'd already chosen him. And now, I was left with nothing. One night, after a few too many drinks, I finally called her back. Her voice shook when she answered. "I don't know what to say," she began, barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to make this right." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. "You can't. You've already made your choice. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to know that," she said, her voice trembling. "I know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But the damage is done." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could feel the weight of her regret, but I couldn't let it affect me anymore. "Is there any chance of us fixing this?" she finally asked. "No," I said, the word coming out sharper than I intended. "You had your chance, and you chose him." "I'll never forgive myself for this," she said, her voice breaking. "I'll never forget it," I replied, and I hung up before she could say anything else. The weight of it all finally hit me. The finality of it. This wasn't just the end of our relationship. It was the end of everything I thought I knew about her, about us. The person I had loved was gone, and all that was left was the ghost of what we used to be. I didn't know what came next, but I did know this. I was done. I was moving forward, and I wasn't going back. The days after the phone call passed in a blur. I stayed away from the house, refusing to let myself fall back into old habits, to return to the place where everything had fallen apart. But no matter how far I distanced myself, I couldn't escape the fact that the life I had built was gone. The emotional weight was heavy, like a backpack full of bricks I couldn't put down. I tried to keep myself occupied, staying with friends, taking trips to places I'd never been. But the quiet moments, the stillness of the night, always brought me back to it. Her, the affair, the lies, the broken promises. And then it hit me. I couldn't run forever. I couldn't keep hiding in the noise and the distractions. At some point, I would have to face it all, what happened, what I lost, and, eventually, what would come next. One evening, I went to the gym to clear my head. The physical exertion, the sweat, the pounding of my heart, it all gave me something else to focus on. I needed that release, something to feel in control of. I pushed myself harder than usual, until my muscles burned and my mind finally quieted. When I got back to my temporary place, I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. The peace didn't last long. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew it was her before I even checked. I hadn't heard from her since that last call, but I wasn't surprised she was reaching out again. I stared at the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the message. But I didn't open it. Instead, I turned the phone over, not ready to face it yet. The truth was, I was still unsure of what I wanted. On one hand, I was angry, furious, even. The betrayal was something I could never forget. But on the other hand, there was a part of me that still longed for the person I thought she was. The person I had married. The complexity of it all was suffocating. How could I reconcile the love I'd felt for her with what she'd done to me? How could I ever look at her the same way again? I didn't have the answers yet. And maybe I wasn't supposed to. Maybe the process of moving on was something I'd need to figure out on my own, without her, without the noise of apologies and excuses. I set the phone down, leaned back, and closed my eyes. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I didn't need to hate her either. I needed time. And time, as it always does, would reveal the next step. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of the past slowly started to lighten. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but it wasn't consuming me like it once had. I started focusing on things that were mine again, things I had neglected when I was so caught up in her, in us. My friends, my hobbies, my own well-being. They all began to take precedence once more. I spent more time at the gym, pushing myself to get stronger, not just physically but mentally. I took up hiking, going out on trails that forced me to disconnect from the world, from all the noise. Nature, in its raw simplicity, had a way of reminding me that life moved on, whether I was ready for it or not. I even started to feel the spark of curiosity about the future again. It was subtle, a small flicker of hope in the back of my mind. Maybe there was more to life than the pain of the past. Maybe I could start over. One evening, about a month after I had left, I went out with an old friend. We grabbed drinks, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself actually laughing. The conversation flowed easily, and it felt good to not have to carry around the emotional baggage that had weighed me down for so long. "Damn, it's good to see you like this," my friend said, grinning. "I didn't think I'd see the day when you actually started living again." I smiled back, feeling a bit of pride. "Yeah, I guess it's time." I'd been avoiding socializing, not wanting to deal with the questions or the pity, but this felt different. It was just a conversation, nothing heavy. It was the first time in a while that I'd been reminded of who I was outside of my past, outside of the betrayal. Later that night, as I was heading home, I thought about her. How strange it was that I could go a day without her dominating my thoughts. How much of my life had been defined by her, by that relationship, and how much of me had been lost in the process. It didn't hurt as much anymore. Sure, there were moments when I remembered how she used to make me laugh, how we used to talk about our dreams and plans. But the man I was becoming wasn't the same man she had known. I had changed, and that change was what kept me moving forward. When I got back to my place, I checked my phone. There was another message from her, this time a long one. Apologies. Regret. More excuses. But it didn't make me angry. It didn't make me feel anything, really. I read it, then put the phone down. I didn't need to reply. I didn't know her that. I had my own life to live now. Time had passed, and I was getting used to my new normal. I wasn't the same person I was before, but I was learning to embrace it. I had made peace with what happened, or so I thought. One Saturday afternoon, I went to my favorite coffee shop. It had become my quiet place to recharge, my small escape from the world. The barista knew my order by heart, and the sound of the coffee machine was oddly comforting. I sat in the corner, absorbed in my book, when the door chimed, and I froze. There she was, standing by the counter, scanning the menu as if nothing had happened. For a second, my heart skipped. It was surreal, seeing her in this mundane setting, a place I had been going to get away from everything that reminded me of her. I told myself to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen her, but I couldn't. Our eyes met. The world slowed for just a moment. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Or was it just a lingering numbness? She approached me, hesitating for a moment before she spoke. "Hey," she said, her voice soft. "I didn't expect to see you here." I closed my book, setting it aside. I hadn't planned on a conversation, but here we were. "Yeah, same," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "What are you doing here?" "I come here sometimes," she said, shifting nervously. "To clear my head." I studied her for a moment. She didn't look the same, more fragile, more vulnerable, but I didn't feel sorry for her. The betrayal was still fresh in my mind. The anger, though faded, was still there, tucked away in the corners of my mind. She was waiting for me to say something. Anything. But I stayed quiet, thinking. How could I answer? What was there left to say? "I didn't think you'd want to see me again," she said, her voice trembling. I feel like I've lost everything." I felt the weight of her words, but I didn't let them affect me. "You did," I said, my voice calm. "You lost everything when you made your choice." She looked down, her face crumpling, tears threatening to fall. "I'm sorry. I really am." I nodded. "I know you are. But it doesn't change anything." She stood there, silent for a moment. She seemed to want to say more, but the words were stuck. Eventually, she sighed, shoulders slumping. "I should go." I didn't stop her. I didn't need to say anything else. "Goodbye," I said, not out of bitterness, but with finality. She nodded, and then, without another word, walked out. The door chimed behind her, and the coffee shop felt quieter somehow. I sat there for a long time after, the weight of the encounter settling in. It wasn't about closure, really. It was more about realizing that I had moved on, that I didn't need to keep looking back. The past was over, and so was she. It had been a few weeks since that last encounter. The air had changed, and with it, I had changed too. The weight of the past no longer felt like a burden. It had simply faded into the background, like an old song playing softly in the distance. Life was moving on, and so was I. I kept myself busy, but it wasn't the kind of busy I used to do to distract myself. No, now I was intentionally filling my time with things that mattered to me. I went back to old hobbies, traveled to new places I'd always wanted to visit, and found joy in simple, quiet moments. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in ages, spent weekends hiking, and even took up painting, something I had always wanted to try but had never had the time for. The more I focused on myself, the more I realized how much of me had been lost in that toxic relationship. I hadn't been myself for a long time, but now, I was finding the version of me I had almost forgotten. One evening, I went to a local bar with a friend. It was a casual night, just a drink and some laughs, nothing special. But as the night wore on, I found myself talking to a woman who had a way of making everything seem a little brighter. Her laughter was easy, and her eyes had that spark I hadn't realized I was missing. We didn't talk about the past, about the pain, or the betrayal. It wasn't necessary. We just talked. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of connection that wasn't defined by heartache. It wasn't love, not yet anyway, but it was something better than the emptiness I had been holding on to. It was the realization that I was capable of moving on, that I could find new joys and new experiences. I wasn't bound by the mistakes of the past anymore. I was free to create a future on my terms. The next day, I woke up with a new kind of peace. I wasn't looking for validation, and I wasn't waiting for someone else to fix me. I had done the work. I had found my own way through the storm. And now, I was standing in the calm. Life wasn't perfect, and I knew that there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited for what those challenges might be. I had learned that moving on wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing to live, to let go, and to embrace the future, no matter what it held.